Hello again. Welcome back. We're going to continue our discussion of web components. So in the last video, we kind of discussed like what is a web component, and it's probably still maybe a little vague to you. So let's actually make a web component and see how they work from that perspective, right? So here I'm on the lesson page right now. This is lesson 15 in our class syllabus. And so let's go down to naming custom elements, right? So in this section, let's talk about the names for custom elements. So one of the rules for custom element names is they must contain a hyphen, okay? So this name would be good. This name would also be good. This name is not working because it doesn't have a hyphen. This one doesn't have a hyphen. This is required, okay? So you cannot register a custom element with the browser unless there's a hyphen in the name. Okay, when you create the names, like if I use these names here, I would create the tags and they would look like this, right? So I would use my custom element name there, right? And then I just wrap it in the angle brackets. When you use a custom element, when you implement one in your web page, you have to do it with an opening and a closing tag. So even if the tag is empty, like you don't put any content in here, you still have to have the closing tag. Usually the browser will let you do this or this when you have a tag that doesn't close, but for custom elements that's not allowed and you must have a closing tag, okay? If Bootstrap had a carousel tag, they would use it in this way, okay? So when you're creating a custom element, you're going to write JavaScript that backs up the functionality of that tag. So if the tag needs extra functionality, right, then you're going to back it up with a class that you define in JavaScript. Okay, so imagine I have a class here called myElement, okay? And I can say I extend the HTML element. So custom elements should always extend HTML element. There's a couple, and there's a few of these actually. There's HTML element and there's a few more tags like the paragraph tag, right? And stuff like that. You can extend those also. There's a couple tags you can't extend, and I don't remember what the list is off the top of my head. You can look it up in the docs, right? But there's a couple tags that they don't allow you to extend. These are usually the form elements, like you can't extend the checkbox and the input. And that for that reason, it's a security issue, right? Is the reasoning behind that, right? Okay, so here you can see I'm extending HTML element and I've defined my element here. Now to define a new custom element, you're going to say custom elements dot define, and then you're going to say the name of the tag and the name of the class that backs it up, my element, right? So from here on out, you could say angle brackets my element, and that would be the tag that you would use in your HTML document, okay? So when we define properties inside this class, since we're extending HTML element comes with some built-in properties, right? And we want to make sure we don't accidentally overwrite those. So it's probably best practice for us to use the underscore when we define new property names, okay? So let's give it a try. I'm actually just going to copy this just to get started. And maybe I'll put this at the bottom of my HTML document here. I'll add a script. And I'm just going to paste this in here. Now, if we were doing like a real production project, we would probably not just put it in the script tag here. We'd probably put it in its own document, right? But for right now, just to get this to work, we'll just paste it here. So I've got my script tag there, and I've got a class that I'm defining, and then I have a new custom element. And if I was to use this new custom element in my page, I could just use that tag here. Maybe I'll put it outside the form. I'll just put it here. I'll say tag my dash, what did I call that? My element, right? So it'd just be this name here. Right, and I have to close it with a closing tag, okay? So there's my element there. Let's take a look at the browser here and see what it looks like. I'm going to refresh it. I don't have any errors, right? So I'll look at my element here, and there it is, custom element, right? Doesn't look like much, but it's the beginning of big things, right? Okay. So again, like if we add properties, we're probably going to add them with the underscore name just to make sure we don't accidentally overwrite properties that exist on HTML element. Well, what if we want to add a shadow DOM to our element? So when we add a new my element to the page, it wants to display some extra markup, kind of like the checkbox and the range slider and the color picker do, right? So how would we do that? Well, what we would do is we would create a new shadow root by saying this dot attach shadow and then set the options for it. Okay, so let's give that a try. I'm going to copy this right here. And inside my constructor right here, I'm going to add this dot shadow root. Now I've created shadow root with the underscore property. So this is a name that I made. You could name this anything you like, but I gave it the underscore to separate it from properties that might belong to HTML element. Okay. And once you've created the shadow root, you can also attach stuff to it. So actually, let's see if that actually shows up right now. So if I refresh this, oh yeah, you can see my element now has a little triangle next to it. And when I open it, you can see it has shadow content. Now there's nothing here yet because we didn't add anything to the shadow DOM. So let's give that a try. What if I say const, actually maybe I'll make this a property. I'll say this dot text equals document dot create element, right? So I'm going to use document create element, and then in here I'm going to say what element it is I want to create, and I want to create a div, say. Okay, so here I've created a new text div, right? And if I want, I can attach that div to the shadow root. So I'm going to say shadow root dot append child, and then I'll say which element or which node I want to append, which is going to be this dot text. Okay, so I'll do that. And now when I look at my page here, actually let's review this really quickly. So we created the shadow root, right? And we attached it to our DOM element. Then I created a new DOM element here. Now when you create a DOM element with create element, it actually doesn't get added anywhere to the DOM until you append it. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to append it to the shadow root, and it will go inside the shadow DOM. So let's take a look now. If I look at my element and I open it up, you can see the shadow content now has some content, and there's a div in there. Okay, let's add some text to the div. So this is kind of the hello world of our web components. So I'm going to say this dot text dot inner HTML equals, and let's do our classic hello world like this. And now you can see that my new custom element says hello world, right? Which is not super exciting, but all I did was add my element to the page, and it comes with the hello world. And so if you start thinking like a developer, you start thinking like, okay, what content would I want to add to this tag automatically, so that when people were using this tag in their documents, they didn't have to write the markup themselves. It automatically created it. In the same way that the checkbox creates the check mark, the range slider creates the slider, and the color picker creates the color picker, right? Or the input type color creates the color picker, right? So we kind of just did the same thing on a much smaller scale, like simpler, but this is the start of our web component journey, right? So what did we do? Let's review that, right? And actually, let's just, as a really quick example here, if I go to my element, you can see if I open it up, I get shadow content, and when I open that up, I get a div, and inside the div it says hello world, right? So let's go review what we just did. We created a class, okay, that extends HTML elements. So this class is a new type of HTML element, okay? Then what I did is I used custom elements.define, and I gave it a name for the new tag that we're going to create, or the new custom element we're going to create, and then I gave it the class that backs up that element. So every time the browser creates an instance of my element, it will also create an instance of this text or this class and assign it to that element. Okay? And then anything that we do inside the class here will be happening right here in the browser. And we can use this multiple times. We can have it as many times as we like on the page, and it will always do the same thing, right? And we can also add other features to this. So we can add attributes. So if you wanted to add an attribute here, like a type attribute, kind of like we used up here with the input, you can do that. The custom element can also set the value of the type. So if you had a value here, you could set that, and the custom element could define the value that displays here. Like that happens in a lot of tags, like the input does that, right? If you ask for the value, it tells you what you've entered into the text field, or what the color is, or what the range is. Or with the checkbox, it'll tell you whether it's checked true or not, false, right? Okay. So we can do that. We can also give it more, we can give it styles. So if there's a style that we want to apply here, we can apply that. So for example, if I always want hello world to be like really big, I could say this dot text dot style dot font size equals 60 pixels, right? Now every time I get a hello world, it's always going to be a 60 pixel hello world, right? So this is where, like I said when I first began, this is where HTML, CSS, and JavaScript all combine to make web components, right? Web components are built from all three, and they all work together. Okay, so thanks for watching. We'll continue this in the next video as a challenge for you. If you want to experiment with this, try creating the example like I created here, and try adding some more styles there, and then ask yourself, is there anything you could do here to extend this to do something different? And I'll give you a couple suggestions. Maybe instead of saying hello world, it always has some random text. Maybe the color is always random. So let's do, let's say, random color, random text. Let's do add new styles, right? So try this. Try to add these three things just to experiment and see how this works, right? And you can follow my format here to add styles with JavaScript, okay? And then I'll see you in the next video, and we'll do some more with this in the next lesson, okay? And thanks for watching.